One of the most famous stories in mythology is, of course, the story of the Trojan horse. Homer wrote about Achilles and his troops entering the city of Troy using a horse very much like this one. This horse is a replica of what we think the Trojan horse may have looked like. Troy has always been an example because of the mastery of the city. This city was one of the first cities to have drainage systems. It had a megaron style of building houses, which was very interesting because you actually entered the house from the roof, and this was for security. The ramped entrances that you see behind me were just part of how the city was built. Now, when I'm talking about a city like this, during the first level of Troy, most people were still living in caves throughout the rest of the world. This is what makes Troy such an unbelievable example of city planning in the world.
There are 10 levels of Troy as of today. The city has been under excavation for over 160 years, and only 10% of the city has been discovered. Most ancient cities would relocate after destruction of the city, whether it be because of war or natural causes. But Troy was an exception. The city was destroyed and rebuilt 10 times during its over 5,000-year existence, creating the 10-level tell in Troy. The walls behind me were built during the Bronze Age and are a part of the 6th level of Troy.
This is the Odeon of Troy. It's not a place where theater shows and gladiators fought. This is actually a place for listening to music or being educated and listening to literature and poetry. This Odeon is very famous because the statues of Roman emperors were here. Hadrian and Augustus both had statues that were put here, which basically proved that they had come here. Now, why would Roman emperors come all the way from Rome to here if it wasn't for war? Well, it was a place of pilgrimage because the Romans actually believed that their ancestral ties were to Troy. You can see these statues at the Troy Museum when you're visiting here. Troy had to live through many earthquakes. It was rebuilt over 10 times possibly. And at the end of its history, which is around the year 500 AD, it was completely covered under sand. It stayed that way for 1,350 years.
Located 6 kilometers away from the Çanakkale Strait or Dardanelles, Troy was a port city that connected the Mediterranean and Anatolia to each other. The sea used to be much closer to the city, but the port area silted in over time. The winds that blow here almost all of the time are the reason that Troy was such an important trade center. Since ships had to sail, the winds of Troy were there to guide them to the ports of abundance in Troy.
Troy has been on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 1998. This museum was opened to actually commemorate the 20th year in the year 2018, and it's the year that we in Turkey celebrated the Year of Troy.
The precious metals that were found by Hendrik Schliemann were brought to Berlin and later, during World War I, were taken by the Russians to the Pushkin Museum, where you can see them today. Some of the pieces that you see at the Archaeological Museum of Troy were actually repatriated from the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. This museum has received several awards for being a museum that really gives people the right story and the chronological order in which things happened. Troy is a city full of legends. Every single level of it has a different story. But what's important is that they all come together under one roof here for you to discover in Turkey. 160 years after it began being excavated, this magical city of Anatolia is still giving us treasures and stories one after another, only in Turkey.